7 years of marriage. I truly believed I had married into a decent family, to a man who loved me with everything he had. I gave it my all. I exhausted my savings and my youth to build that home, only for the same man I shared my pillow with to coldly throw divorce papers in my face. Today he was kicking me out of the house I had helped build with the majority of my own money. And what hurts even more is my mother-in-law, a woman I always respected, tossed a torn bag at my feet with a cruel sneer. "Take this trash of yours too, and don't let me see your face again," she barked. Little did she know that when I opened that bag, a devastating secret would come to light, leaving me paralyzed and shifting the tragedy of my life in a direction no one could have ever imagined. The sharp click of my husband Julian Lockwood's pen as he set it down on the glass table still echoes in my ears like a hammer strike. Outside, Atlanta was in the middle of a heavy summer storm. Large, heavy raindrops lashed against the window, cold and melancholic, perfectly matching my mood at that moment. I sat motionless on the high-end leather sofa, staring at the divorce papers. Julian's fresh signature stared back at me like a mockery of my 7 years as his wife. I had a lump in my throat, unable to utter a single word. I looked at him, the man I fell in love with when I was 20 years old. For him, I hadn't hesitated to walk away from a promising career to become his unconditional support system. His face was still as handsome and elegant as ever, but the look he gave me now was so strange, so icy that it chilled me to the bone. He was no longer the tender husband who held me every night and whispered words of love. The man standing there now was a judge and an executioner, discarding me like an old object. "Sign it." His voice sounded completely devoid of emotion. "This house is in my name. The car too. You came with nothing and you should leave with nothing. It is easier this way. In consideration of our years of marriage, I will give you a sum of money, enough for you to rent a small room and look for a new job." Every word he spoke was like an invisible knife stabbing directly into my bleeding heart. This house, I had personally contributed 2/3 of my savings to build it alongside him. The luxury car he drove was a gift I bought him with my year-end bonus. And now he had the nerve to say everything was his, that I was a parasite who should leave empty-handed. Why? I managed to choke out, my voice hoarse and trembling. "Julian, why are you treating me like this? What did I do wrong?" Julian let out a disdainful smirk, one I had never seen before. "You did nothing wrong, Maya. You just don't fit into my life anymore." He stood up and adjusted his designer tie. "My sister Sienna just got back from London. She has introduced me to new people, new opportunities to change my life. In that world, there is no place for a complacent wife like you." So that was it. All because of Sienna, the little sister I had loved with all my heart, whose 4 years of studies abroad I had financed. The day she left, I treated her like my own flesh and blood, emptying my savings so she wouldn't have to struggle. And now that she was back, the first gift she gave me was such a painful betrayal. At that moment, the living room door swung open. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice Lockwood, walked in. She was wearing silk pajamas and holding a paper fan, with an air as calm as if she had just taken a stroll instead of witnessing the breakup of her son's family. She glanced at me sideways, then at the divorce papers on the table. Her sharp voice rang out with a tone of triumph. "What are you waiting for? Sign it already. Keeping a barren woman like you in this house is just a waste of space. 7 years and not a single heir for this family. What are you clinging to?" Her words were like a bucket of ice water over my pain. The issue of children was my greatest heartache. We had gone to countless doctors. They said we were both fine, that it just wasn't the time. Julian always comforted me, saying he didn't care. It turned out it was all a lie, the perfect excuse to get rid of me. I looked up at her, my eyes pleading for a final shred of humanity, but I only received her frozen gaze. "Don't call me Mom," she snapped. "I don't have a useless daughter-in-law like you. My son Julian has a bright future. He needs a wife who is on his level, someone who knows how to give him children, not a burden who only knows how to live at his expense." I couldn't take it anymore. The pain and indignation rose in my throat. I jumped to my feet, tears streaming down my cheeks. "A burden, you say? I'm a burden? Who paid for the majority of this house? Where did the money for Sienna's education come from? Who took care of both of you every time you were sick all these years? I never threw it in your faces, but that doesn't mean I did nothing. My mother-in-law stood perplexed for a second at my reaction, but then she sneered. Listen to you talk. Where's the proof? The deed to the house is in my son's name. You gave that money to his sister voluntarily, and now you come here to claim it? How shameless. She turned to her son. Julian, what are you waiting for? Throw her out. Having her here one more minute just dirties this house. As if he were only waiting for that order, Julian stepped forward, grabbed me by the arm, and dragged me toward the door. My suitcase, which I had already packed in a daze, was thrown into the entryway. Leave. I'm out of patience with you. He shoved me out the door, and I fell hard onto the cold porch floor. The rain was still falling heavily, lashing my face with a stinging pain. I looked back inside at the man who was my husband and at my mother-in-law, the people I had loved the most, who were now looking at me with strange, cruel eyes. The heavy iron gate began to close. Just then, my mother-in-law stepped out with an old, torn cloth bag in her hand, the one I used to take to the farmer's market. She tossed the bag toward me, and it landed right next to a puddle of dirty water. Take this trash of yours, too, and get out of my sight, she shrieked. And the door slammed shut, leaving me outside with the darkness, the rain, and absolute despair. I sat there letting the rain soak me, my tears mixing with the salty water. I didn't know where to go anymore. I had lost everything. But perhaps out of curiosity or a last shred of hope, I reached out my trembling hand and picked up the torn bag she had just thrown at me. I opened it, and what was inside took my breath away, opening a completely new chapter in my life. The evening storm showed no signs of letting up. I was huddled under the awning of a closed shop, soaked and freezing. My small suitcase lay abandoned beside me, and in my hands I held that torn cloth bag, the only thing my mother-in-law had granted me before shutting the door. How long had I been sitting here? 1 hour? 2 or more? I didn't know. Time seemed to have stopped, leaving only the pain and the emptiness eating away at my soul. My mind raced with thousands of unanswered questions. Why? Why had it come to this? What did I do to deserve such a tragic ending? 7 years. It wasn't too long, but it was enough for a woman to pour all her youth, faith, and hope into a marriage. I once thought I was the luckiest woman in the world for marrying Julian. When we met, he was just a boy from a small town in rural Alabama who had come to Atlanta to make a life for himself. He was kind, honest, and had a smile as warm as the sun. I was a recent graduate back then, starting to manage a small fashion boutique. Our love grew naturally and softly. He had nothing, but he had a sincere heart. He told me, Maya, I have nothing now, but I promise I will work hard to give you the best life. I won't let you suffer. I believed that promise. I believed in his love. We married in a simple ceremony. No luxury cars, no fancy restaurant, just the blessings of family and friends. After the wedding, we lived in a small rented apartment. Life was hard, but it was always full of laughter. I continued with my business, and Julian worked as an employee at a real estate firm. My business prospered. From one small shop, I expanded into a chain of 3 designer boutiques with a loyal clientele and income that never stopped growing. I never hid anything from Julian. I shared every cent of income, every business plan with him. I wanted him to see that we were one, building our future together. When my business stabilized, I decided to take a step back and dedicate more time to the family. I delegated part of the management to my employees, staying only in the director role. I wanted to be a real wife, to cook for my husband every day, to care for him in every detail. I also started thinking about helping his family. His parents lived in the country in an old, dilapidated house. Every time I visited, my heart sank. I suggested to Julian that we build them a new house. At first, he felt embarrassed, saying he didn't have enough money. I smiled, took his hand, and said, "My money is your money too. Your parents are my parents. Let's take care of them together and give them a dignified place to live." I withdrew nearly $500,000, all my savings at the time, to send to the country so his parents could build a solid 3-story house. The day the new house was finished, all the relatives came to congratulate them. Everyone praised what good children we were. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, took my hand with an emotional voice. Maya, thank you, daughter. Never in my life did I think I would live in such a beautiful house. I felt so happy in that moment. I thought my sincerity had finally been rewarded. Then there was the matter of Sienna. Julian's little sister was smart and a good student. Her greatest dream was to study abroad, but her family couldn't afford it. Seeing the longing in her eyes, I couldn't stand it. I told Julian, let me take care of her. Consider it an investment in her future. At first Julian hesitated, but eventually he accepted. For 4 years, I sent money to Sienna punctually every month without missing a penny. I sacrificed trips and luxuries my friends enjoyed so my sister-in-law could fulfill her dream. I thought that when she returned with her degree, she would be the pride of the family and grateful to her sister-in-law. But I was wrong. I was dead wrong. The change in Julian started about 2 years ago after he was promoted to commercial director. He started coming home late. Business trips multiplied. Dinners at home became scarce, and words of affection dried up. He started paying more attention to his appearance, buying expensive suits and designer watches. I wondered if work pressure had changed him, or if his new environment had pulled him away from the man he used to be. I tried to rekindle the flame, cooking his favorite dishes, dressing better at home, but I only received indifference, sometimes even irritation. Don't bother me. I'm tired. That was the phrase I heard most in the last 2 years. I was sad, hurt, but I never thought he had someone else. I kept blindly believing in our love, in our 7 years of life together. Until Sienna returned. She had changed completely. She was no longer the simple, modest student from before. She returned looking sophisticated, fashionable, and with a mindset I couldn't understand. She told me, Maya, in these times a woman must know how to enjoy herself, to invest in herself. If you keep staying in the kitchen, one day Julian will get bored of you. I just smiled, thinking she was joking, not knowing that was the first warning. Sienna often invited Julian out to nightclubs, to lavish parties that she said were for expanding contacts. At first Julian refused, but then he started going more and more. He would come home smelling of alcohol, with another woman's perfume on his clothes. When I asked him, he would just yell, "Don't be paranoid. It's work. It's social relations. Do you understand?" And finally, the inevitable arrived. Today, he discarded me with a reason of unbearable cruelty. You don't fit in. 7 years of sacrifice, 7 years of effort, and all I received were 4 words. You don't fit in. Another hot tear rolled down my cheek. Where did I go wrong? Was it a mistake to love someone too much, to sacrifice too much for his family, or was it a mistake to trust too much in the word marriage? The rain had let up, leaving only a fine drizzle in the air. The city lit up bright and glowing, but my heart was in an abyss of darkness. Where do I go now? I couldn't go back to my mother's house in this pitiful state. I didn't want to worry her. I looked at the torn cloth bag in my hand, the only thing they had returned to me. Probably some old clothes I used to wear were inside. I smiled bitterly. Even at the end, they treated me like a beggar. But perhaps before breaking down completely, I should see what was inside. It was an unconscious act, a last curiosity before closing a bitter chapter of my life. With trembling hands, I opened the bag, and what appeared before my eyes left me stunned, unable to believe it. It wasn't just a secret. It was a truth that could change everything. Inside the old tattered cloth bag, the first thing I saw wasn't wrinkled clothes as I had imagined. Instead, perfectly placed at the top was a savings passbook with a dark blue leather cover, brand new. I picked it up, dazed. My hands were still shaking from the cold and the shock. What bank was this from? Why was it here? I had never had a passbook like this. With extreme curiosity and disbelief, I opened the first page. Account holder, Maya Vaughn Lockwood. It was my name. But it was the figure underneath that almost stopped my heart. $20 million. $20 million. I rubbed my eyes and looked at the number several times. There was like an electric shock that shook me, making all the fatigue, pain, and despair from before disappear, leaving only a state of incredible shock and wonder. Where had this money come from? Why would my mother-in-law, a woman who had always looked down on me and counted every penny, put such an enormous sum in this bag and give it to me? It was too illogical, too absurd. Maybe it was a mistake, or it was a new trap they were setting for me. Thousands of questions swirled in my head. Trembling, I kept checking the rest of the bag. Beneath the savings book was a bundle of documents, carefully kept in a transparent plastic sleeve. I pulled them out to look at them. It was a property deed, but the address wasn't the house in the country I had paid for nor the estate Julian had just kicked me out of. The address clearly indicated estate number 27 West Paces Ferry Road, Buckhead, Atlanta, one of the most expensive and prestigious residential areas in Atlanta. And what left me paralyzed once again was that in the owner's section there was only one name printed clearly and sharply, Maya Vaughn Lockwood. Along with the deed were the sales contract and the payment receipts, all settled. The estate had been bought in cash 6 months ago and was completely mine. My mind went blank. All logic vanished before what was happening. A savings book with $20 million, a luxury estate, everything in my name, placed in a torn bag and delivered by the same mother-in-law who had just humiliated me and kicked me into the street. Was it a dream, or was I so hurt that I was having hallucinations? I pinched my arm hard. Sharp pain spread. It was real. At the bottom of the bag there was something else, a cheap burner phone, the old kind used only for calls and texts, and a portable battery. And taped to the back of the phone was a carefully sealed letter with nothing written on the outside. My heart was pounding in my chest. I knew the answer to all this madness must be in that letter. Trembling, I broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Inside were lines of careful, familiar handwriting. It was the handwriting of my mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice. Maya, my daughter. When you read these lines, you will probably hate me. You will hate this entire family to the bone. I am sorry. I am sorry for all the cruel words, all the heartless actions I have done to you today. But daughter, please believe me, it has all been an act, a painful performance I was forced to play to protect you, to protect what is yours. I discovered the true faces of Julian and Sienna a long time ago. Julian hasn't just been unfaithful to you, he has conspired with his mistress to embezzle funds from your own company. And Sienna, the daughter I love the most, is not only an ingrate but has incited her brother to steal your assets and throw you into the street to clear the way for his mistress. I overheard their conversation. They were planning to wait until they emptied your accounts, then they would invent an excuse for divorce and leave you in the street with nothing. I tried to dissuade them, but it was in vain. Greed has blinded them. I knew that if I openly took your side, they would become more cautious and act faster. I had no choice but to play the role of an evil mother-in-law, to take their side so they would lower their guard, so they would believe I was with them. Only then would I have time to help you in secret. The $20 million are all my life savings plus some land from the family inheritance that I sold in secret. I have put it all in your name. The estate in Buckhead was also bought with that money. I wanted you to have a place to go, a safe haven when the storm arrived. I knew Julian wanted to keep your house, so I had to prepare a safer escape route for you. I made sure all the property papers were in your name. He can never touch them. Today, as I kicked you out, my heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. But I had to do it, Maya. I had to let them see that you had truly been left with nothing, that you had been kicked out in absolute humiliation. Only then would they feel satisfied, lower their guard, and show their true faces. This is a game of chess, and we have to win. This phone is for us to communicate in secret. Do not use your old mobile, they might have it monitored. Keep playing the role of a pitiful woman abandoned by her husband without a cent. Let them continue with their play. I will help you gather all the proof of their crimes. When the time comes, we will give them the final blow. Daughter, be strong. The play has only just begun. Love. Mom. I folded the letter. Tears were running down my cheeks, but this time they weren't tears of pain or despair. They were tears of emotion, of gratitude, and of a hope being reborn from the ashes. My mother-in-law, the woman I thought was cruel and cold, turned out to be the one who loved and protected me the most. She didn't choose direct confrontation but a thorny, more painful path, accepting the role of the villain to protect me from the shadows. Such a bold plan, such an immense sacrifice. I looked again at the savings book and the property deed. They were no longer just material goods. They were love, trust, the weapon my mother-in-law had handed to me. I wiped my tears. My gaze became firm and sharp. I won't break down. I won't let my mother-in-law's sacrifice be in vain. I will continue this play. I will act until the final curtain. Julie and Sienna, enjoy yourselves while you can, because your time of happiness is running out. The letter from my mother-in-law was like a breath of fresh air that rekindled the flame of hope and the will to fight within me. I was no longer a pitiful victim huddled in the rain. I had a goal, a plan, and most importantly, an incredibly strong and wise ally. I carefully tucked the savings book, the deed, and the letter into the bottom of the cloth bag, carrying only the cheap phone she had prepared for me. I had to get out of there quickly, find a safe place to begin my performance. I couldn't go to my mother's house immediately. If Julian and Sienna were suspicious, they might look for me there. I needed a temporary place, somewhere no one could imagine. Suddenly, I remembered Tasha, a friend I had helped when she first moved to Atlanta to make a life for herself. She lived alone in a small apartment in East Point, quite far from the center, and with no connection to my social circle. I dialed her number, and luckily the one I remembered was correct. Hello? Tasha, is that you? Lord have mercy, Maya, it's been so long. How are you? Tasha's voice on the other end of the line was as warm and sincere as ever. I forced my voice to sound trembling and pitiful. Tasha, I've had some trouble. Could I stay at your place for a few days? Tasha didn't ask many questions. She just said firmly, of course. You can come right now. Same address. I'll be waiting for you. Tasha's apartment wasn't large, but it was very tidy and cozy. When she saw me soaked and disheveled, she was shocked. She quickly gave me dry clothes and made me a hot ginger tea. My goodness, what happened to you? Where is Julian? I sat clutching the warm cup and began to tell her my story, but I only told her half the truth, the painful half my mother-in-law had designed for me. I told her how Julian and his sister had betrayed me, forcing me to divorce and throwing me out of the house with nothing. I cried, and this time the tears weren't entirely an act. They were the frustration of my 7 years of sacrifice. I deliberately omitted the part about my mother-in-law and the enormous fortune. Tasha, listening to me, became enraged. She slammed the table and cursed Julian's family without mercy. What lowlifes! How can people be so rotten in this world? Don't you worry, Maya. You stay right here with me. I'm not rich, but you won't go hungry. Don't be afraid. Tasha's kindness moved me deeply. I knew I had found the perfect hiding spot. That night I used the new phone and sent a single message to my mother-in-law. I am safe. A few minutes later she replied, good. Stay calm. They have already started to act. And so it was. The next morning, while helping Tasha clean, a social media post caught my attention. Sienna, my sister-in-law, had posted a status full of hints on her profile. Finally, the sky is clearing. There are burdens that don't belong to us, and it's better to let them go soon to welcome better things. Next to the text was a photo of her and Julian in a luxury cafe, both smiling broadly as if they had lifted a great weight off their shoulders. The post quickly received hundreds of likes and comments. Friends of theirs asked what they were celebrating, how sharp Julian looked. Sienna didn't respond directly. She just left smiling and mysterious emojis, increasing everyone's curiosity. I knew this was their first move, a test of public opinion. They wanted to create the image that our marriage had ended amicably, that I had left of my own will, while they began a new and brilliant life. But their farce didn't end there. That same afternoon, my mother-in-law sent me a short audio recording through the secret phone. It was a conversation between her and Julian during dinner. Mom, I've settled things with Maya. She was understanding. She signed voluntarily, and she left. I gave her a sum of money. I didn't want her to leave empty-handed. Julian's voice sounded pompous and magnanimous. Better that way, replied Mrs. Beatrice, maintaining her role as a disinterested mother. Settle it quickly and move on. Sienna introduced you to that girl, the director of the modeling agency. Take the opportunity. A man shouldn't be without a woman by his side. Yes, Mom, I know. The girl isn't bad at all. Good family, beautiful, smart. I'm sure she will help me a lot in my career. I listened to the recording with a frozen heart. Barely a day after throwing me out, he was already planning his future with another woman. And my mother-in-law, her performance was masterful. She had skillfully brought up the subject so Julian would reveal his plans. The director of the modeling agency, so that was the opportunity to change his life that Sienna was talking about. My marriage hadn't even officially ended, and they were already clearing the way for another woman, a more suitable woman with a better social position. That night I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about what my mother-in-law had written in the letter. Julian has conspired with his mistress to embezzle funds from your own company. My company, although I had delegated it to my employees, required my signature for all important financial decisions and large transactions. How could Julian divert money unless there was a mole, unless someone inside my company was helping him? A name suddenly appeared in my mind, making me break into a cold sweat. Danielle Hollowell, my chief accountant. Danielle was a quiet, meticulous woman who had been with me for 5 years. I trusted her completely. I had entrusted her with all the accounting and finances. But I remembered that recently I had heard employees gossiping about Danielle buying a luxury condo, something impossible on her salary. At the time I thought her family must have money and didn't give it any importance. But now it all seemed incredibly suspicious. Immediately, I turned on my laptop and logged into the company's internal management system. I went to the finance section and reviewed all transactions from the last 6 months. My heart was racing. I reviewed hundreds of transactions. At first, nothing seemed abnormal. All expenses had valid invoices and receipts. But then I stopped at several payments under the concept of strategic marketing costs to a consulting firm with a very strange name, Rising Star LLC. The payments weren't huge, only a few $1,000s each time, but they were repeated monthly. The strange thing was that I had never heard of that company, nor had I approved any strategy related to it. I quickly searched for Rising Star LLC on the internet. The result left me stunned. The company had been founded only 6 months ago, and the legal representative was none other than Julian Lockwood. Everything was clear. He had created a shell company and allied with Danielle to generate fake service contracts, legalizing the transfer of money from my company into his pocket. Such a sophisticated, cruel plot. Not only had he betrayed me emotionally, but he was stealing the money earned with the sweat of his own wife's brow. I sat in front of the computer, my hands clenched so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The rage inside me reached its peak. But I knew it wasn't the time to act. I needed to stay calm, gather more evidence, not only to unmask him but to make him pay before the law. My play now had a new villain, and I knew that to defeat them I needed a plan even more perfect than theirs. The shock of discovering the embezzlement plot didn't sink me. On the contrary, it was like a catalyst that made my determination stronger than ever. I was no longer an innocent lamb waiting patiently. I had become a wolf, a wounded wolf waiting patiently for the moment to counterattack. I knew that to face a devilish alliance formed by my husband, my sister-in-law, and a trusted employee, I couldn't act alone. I needed stronger and more reliable allies. The first person I thought of was my own mother, Mama Ruth. She was a retired school teacher, kind and gentle but not weak at all. She always taught me that a woman can sacrifice, but she must never allow others to trample on her dignity. The next morning I took an early train to visit her. I didn't warn her. I wanted to surprise her. Her small house on the outskirts of the city was still as quiet and warm as ever. Seeing me appear suddenly looking haggard, my mother was worried. But before she could ask, I hugged her tight like a child seeking refuge in the safest place in the world. I told her everything, how I had been kicked out of the house, Julian and Sienna's plot, and the performance my mother-in-law was directing. I showed her Mrs. Beatrice's letter and the evidence of the shell company. My mother listened in silence. Her face went from worry to shock and then to indignation. When I finished, she said nothing. She just squeezed my hand tightly. "Baby girl, you have suffered so much," she said, her voice breaking. "From now on you won't fight alone. Mama is here." My mother's support gave me great peace of mind, but I knew that to win this legal battle, love was not enough. I needed someone who knew the law, someone who could turn my evidence into a sharp weapon. "Mama, I need a good lawyer," I said. My mother nodded immediately. "I have an old friend. His name is Mr. Ashford. He is a very famous attorney in Atlanta, specialized in asset disputes and divorces. He is a very direct and fair man, and he hates liars. Let me call him right now. The meeting with Attorney Ashford was organized that same afternoon in his office. He was a middle-aged man, tall, with a distinguished bearing and an incredibly sharp gaze. After reviewing all the documentation I provided, my mother-in-law's letter, bank statements, information about Julian's shell company, Mr. Ashford only nodded with an expressionless face. His calmness made me a little impatient. Mr. Ashford, what do you think? Is there enough evidence to? He interrupted me with a firm voice. Not only is there enough for you to win the divorce and recover all your assets, but there is enough to file a criminal complaint against Julian for embezzlement and fraud. Even his sister Sienna and the accountant could be considered accomplices. He looked at me seriously. But the question isn't whether we have enough evidence, but how far you want to go. Do you want to put your husband in jail? His question left me paralyzed. Put Julian in jail? I had never thought about it. Despite how cruel he had been, he was still the man I once loved, my husband for 7 years. A part of me still hesitated. Seeing my silence, Mr. Ashford continued. Maya, I understand how you feel, but you must remember that misunderstood mercy is a cruelty to yourself. Someone who no longer feels anything for you, who has deceived you and stolen the fruit of your labor, does not deserve your consideration. This battle isn't just to get back what is yours, but to prevent them from continuing to deceive other women. The lawyer's words illuminated the dark corners of my mind. He was right. I couldn't be weak at this moment. If I forgave Julian, it would be like tolerating evil. I understand. I raised my head. My gaze became determined. I want everything resolved according to the law. Whoever has done wrong must face the consequences. Good. Mr. Ashford nodded, satisfied. Then let's start with the plan. For now, continue with your performance. Show yourself to be pitiful, desperate. The more you do, the more confident they will become. Meanwhile, I will discreetly gather more evidence, especially testimonies from employees of your company to strengthen the case. We won't attack immediately. We will wait for the perfect moment, when they least expect it, to give the final blow. I left the lawyer's office feeling completely secure. I had a clear plan, a defined strategy. I was no longer a small boat adrift in the ocean. I had a lighthouse guiding me and an expert captain. I returned to Tasha's apartment and continued with my role. I let myself look more haggard, eating and sleeping little, spending the day with a lost gaze. Tasha looked at me with pity and kept encouraging me. I knew her concern was sincere, but I couldn't tell her the truth. The fewer people who knew about the play, the safer it would be. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Julian and Sienna were celebrating their victory. My mother-in-law kept me informed. Julian had made his relationship with the model public. He took her shopping, to luxury restaurants, without any qualms. Sienna didn't stop bragging on social media about designer clothes and exotic trips financed by her dear brother. They were drunk with success, not knowing that an invisible net was being woven and slowly closing around them. I read my mother-in-law's messages, saw the photos of Julian and Sienna, and my heart no longer fluttered. I only felt pity for them. They were dancing happily on the edge of the abyss without realizing it. My performance continued every day. I played the role of a failed and pitiful woman to perfection. I didn't contact Julian or show any sign of resistance. My silence made him and his family lower their guard completely. They believed I had accepted my fate, that I had surrendered, and that was exactly what I wanted. I needed them confident, arrogant, so that when I acted they wouldn't have time to react. One night, while I was alone in my room, the secret phone vibrated. It was a message from my mother-in-law. Sienna is going to celebrate her birthday. She's planning a huge party at the most luxurious hotel in the city to introduce her new boyfriend and reaffirm her status. Julian is paying for everything. A brilliant idea crossed my mind. This was the moment I had been waiting for. A huge party with all of Julian and Sienna's friends and business partners present. The perfect stage to bring down the curtain on this play. I smiled a cold smile in the darkness. Thank you, Sienna, for giving me such a good opportunity. Your birthday party will undoubtedly be an unforgettable memory. The plan for Sienna's special birthday gift began to take shape in secret between attorney Ashford and me. Time was short, only 2 weeks, but with what we had, we were sure we could cause an earthquake. The first thing was to confirm the details of the party. I called my mother-in-law, maintaining my weak and pitiful tone. "Mom, I heard that next weekend is Sienna's birthday." Mrs. Beatrice's voice on the other end sounded as cold as ever, but I could detect a hint of satisfaction. "Yes, she plans to do it big. She's invited hundreds of people to the Ritz-Carlton. Her boyfriend is from a good family. She has to look good. Julian is supporting her in everything. He's taking care of the organization from A to Z." "Wow," I replied in a whisper, faking sadness. "Can I come, Mom? After all, she is my sister-in-law." My mother-in-law let out a dry laugh. "What are you coming for? For people to look at you and whisper, 'Stay home and leave us in peace.'" I hung up and smiled. Everything was going according to plan. The less they wanted me to appear, the more impactful my arrival would be. Meanwhile, Mr. Ashford got to work. He sent an official request to my company asking in my name that the management, meaning Julian, cooperate by providing all accounting books and invoices from the last year for the liquidation of assets for the divorce. Of course, this was just a distraction maneuver, a farce directed at Danielle, the chief accountant. Upon receiving the request, I called an urgent meeting, inviting Danielle and other department heads. I played the role of a weakened, worried, and helpless boss to perfection. I said that my husband's lawyers were pressuring me, that they suspected financial irregularities in the company. I asked Danielle to prepare all the necessary documentation. "Danielle, please review everything carefully," I said, looking her directly in the eyes with a pleading voice. "I trust you blindly, but Julian's lawyers are very aggressive. If they find any error, not only me but the whole company will have problems." Danielle, as I expected, seemed nervous but tried to stay calm. She nodded and promised to review everything. I knew that immediately after the meeting she would inform Julian, and that was what I wanted. I wanted them to panic, to fear that their schemes were about to be discovered. I wanted them to act on their own to hide their crimes, and in doing so they would make more mistakes. Sure enough, that same night my mother-in-law sent me another recording. This time it was a tense phone conversation between Julian and Danielle. "What are you saying, that your wife's lawyers want to audit the accounts?" Danielle's voice was a bundle of nerves. "We're lost. What if they discover the contracts with Rising Star?" "Calm down." Julian's voice also sounded worried, but he was trying to reassure her. "All the documents are legal. You just have to say they were real campaigns. Maya doesn't know anything about marketing. What is she going to check?" "But..." "No buts. Now do what I tell you. With the excuse of year-end cleaning, destroy all physical copies of those contracts and also delete the data from the computer. Don't leave a trace. Do it. I'll take care of the rest. When this is over, I will reward you generously." The recording ended. I sat in silence. A deep disgust washed over me. Not only were they thieves, but now they were planning to destroy evidence. But they didn't know that all their movements were being watched. Attorney Ashford smiled upon hearing the recording. "Excellent. The destruction of evidence is a very valuable aggravating factor before a court. Now we just have to wait for the party." In the following days, I continued playing my role as a broken woman. I didn't go to the company, claiming health problems and delegating everything to my department heads. I knew Danielle was taking the opportunity to carry out her plan, and I had secretly installed remote data recovery software on the company server. Every action of deletion or modification she performed was recorded. Meanwhile, Julian and Sienna were still busy preparing their party of the century. They had no idea that it wasn't a birthday party but a public trial where all their sins would be exposed. I also started preparing for my appearance. I didn't need to buy new clothes or put on striking makeup. My weapon wasn't my beauty but the truth. I just needed to prepare myself mentally, keep a cool head to face the people who had trampled on my life without mercy. I contacted some close friends, those who had seen Julian and me from the beginning, and invited them to a special event on Saturday night at the Ritz-Carlton. I didn't give them details. I just told them they were going to see a very interesting play. The day of the party finally arrived. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was no longer the tired and haggard Maya. I had regained the bearing of a confident and determined businesswoman. I chose a simple but elegant black dress, a high updo, and intense red lipstick full of power. My mother took my hand, her gaze full of confidence. "Go, baby girl. It's time to bring down the curtain." I nodded and took a deep breath. Tonight Atlanta wasn't going to sleep. The Ritz-Carlton at night was a display of luxury and splendor, like a storybook palace. The main ballroom was decorated with fresh flowers, balloons, and cascades of crystal lights. Soft music mixed with the bustle of laughter. Sienna, in a quartz-pink evening dress by a famous designer covered in sequins, received guests at the entrance as beautiful and haughty as a princess. Beside her, Julian, in an elegant white suit, holding the hand of a young and beautiful model whom he openly introduced as his new girlfriend, seemed the perfect couple, happy and radiant. Anyone who saw them would think they were an example of success and fulfillment. They were at the peak of their arrogance, not knowing that the abyss was opening at their feet. I didn't enter the room directly. Together with attorney Ashford and two notaries dressed in civilian clothes, I sat in a cafe on the ground floor, observing in silence. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, had also arrived. She was still playing her role as a simple woman from the country, dressed plainly, sitting in a discreet corner. But I knew her sharp eyes were observing everything. According to the plan, we would wait until 8 o'clock sharp, when the party began and all the guests were present. It would be the moment for the curtain to rise. At 8 o'clock, after Sienna's opening speech full of boasts about her own success and the support of her wonderful brother, the host invited everyone to look at the big screen to see a video of the memorable moments of her last year. That was my moment. I stood up, adjusted my dress, took a deep breath, and together with attorney Ashford and the two notaries, I calmly entered the room. My sudden appearance drew all eyes. The music lowered in volume, and whispers began to spread. Everyone knew who I was, the useless and barren wife who had just been abandoned by her husband. They looked at me with a mix of curiosity, pity, and even contempt. Julian and Sienna, who were on stage, were petrified when they saw me. The smiles froze on their lips. Sienna's face went from radiant to pale, while Julian stammered, unable to speak. "Maya, what are you doing here?" I didn't respond. I just smiled a wide, radiant smile and walked directly onto the stage, taking the microphone from the hands of the bewildered host. "Sorry for interrupting the party." My voice sounded clear, powerful, and resonated throughout the room. "I am Maya Vaughn Lockwood, the legal wife of Mr. Julian Lockwood." I scanned the audience, stopping at familiar faces, friends and partners who had worked with me. Today, on such a happy day for my sister-in-law, I also have a small gift, a special video that I want to dedicate to her and her dear brother. Consider it my congratulations on this new chapter in their lives. With that, I signaled to the video technician whom Mr. Ashford had prepared beforehand. The lights in the room went out, leaving only the light from the big screen. The video began. It wasn't the glamorous images of Sienna, but a photo of the old house in Alabama before being renovated, with the text, "Where a story begins." Next, a series of bank statements appeared, enlarged, clearly showing the sender's name, Maya Vaughn Lockwood, and the recipients, Julian Lockwood and Sienna Lockwood, with figures totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. A subtitle said, "Money to build the house for the in-laws." Money for the sister-in-law's 4 years of study in London. All from a parasite wife. The room began to stir. Whispers grew. Julian and Sienna's faces went from white to purple. The video continued, showing screenshots of transactions between my company and Julian's shell company, Rising Star LLC, fake contracts, fraudulent invoices, everything projected with crystal clarity. The following text appeared, and this is how a wonderful husband responds, embezzling nearly $1 million of his wife's money to support his mistress. The screen changed, showing a series of photos of Julian and the model hugging and in intimate poses in various places, from luxury restaurants to hotels. "Turn that off. Turn that trash off right now," Julian shouted, trying to get on stage. But it was too late. Mr. Ashford and the two notaries blocked his path. The video continued. This time it was the recording of the conversation between Julian and Danielle planning the destruction of evidence. Their voices were sharp and undeniable. Delete it all. Don't leave a trace. The room exploded. Screams, boos, insults everywhere. People turned to look at Julian and Sienna with incredulity, disgust, and contempt. The model, Julian's new girlfriend, was stunned, her face pale as wax. She didn't expect to be just a pawn in his game. The video ended with the image of the divorce papers Julian had thrown at me, with the miserable financial compensation and the demand that I leave with nothing. The last text appeared on the screen like a sentence. Justice may be slow, but it always arrives. The lights in the room came on, and chaos broke loose. Screams, Sienna's hysterical crying, insults from guests who felt deceived. The journalists we had notified rushed onto the stage, pointing their cameras at Julian and Sienna, pelting them with questions. Mr. Lockwood, how do you explain this evidence? Miss Lockwood, were you aware of your brother's fraudulent activities? The lavish birthday party had transformed into a public trial, a tragic comedy where the two protagonists, Julian and Sienna, received everyone's verdict. In the middle of the confusion, I calmly put down the microphone and walked off the stage. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, was waiting for me there. She took my hand, her gaze a mix of compassion and pride. Let's go, baby girl. The play is over. I nodded, and together with my mother-in-law, calmly left the room, leaving behind the ashes of lies and greed. I didn't need to look back. I knew that from that night on, the lives of Julian and Sienna would never be the same again. The storm I unleashed at the Ritz-Carlton had a much greater impact than I had imagined. That same night, the video of the birthday gift and the recordings of the chaos at the party went viral on social media, spreading like wildfire. In a single night, Julian Lockwood went from being a successful commercial director to a fraudster and a villain condemned by society. Sienna Lockwood, from being a haughty princess and a brilliant student, was unmasked as an ingrate living off the sacrifice of her sister-in-law. Their scandal became the hottest topic in all forums and conversations. The shares of the company where Julian worked plummeted. Partners canceled contracts. Friends and colleagues turned their backs on him. They lost everything in one night: career, reputation, and the relationships they were so proud of. The next morning, the police initiated an official investigation. With the evidence presented at the party and my complaint, Julian and Danielle were called to testify. A travel ban was issued immediately, thwarting any escape plan. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and I found a strange peace after the successful premiere. We didn't return to Tasha's apartment or to my mother's house. My mother-in-law organized a short getaway to a resort on Hilton Head Island. She said we needed to get away from the eye of the hurricane and let the law and public opinion do their job. And most importantly, I needed to rest, to heal the deep wounds of my soul. For the first time in many years, I experienced a true sense of freedom. I walked along the white sand, listened to the sound of the waves, and breathed the fresh sea air. I no longer had to worry, plan, or act. I could be myself. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, also seemed to have lifted a great weight off her shoulders. She no longer had that severe and grim expression. She smiled and talked more. She told me about her youth, about the difficulties and failures she had overcome. I realized that behind the hard and cruel facade she had built, there was a woman who had also been hurt, who had had to fight alone. "I'm sorry, Maya," she said suddenly one night while we were sitting on the balcony looking at the sea. "I was wrong to treat you like that. I was selfish. I only thought about my children and forgot that you were also my daughter." I took her wrinkled but still warm hand. "I don't blame you, Mom. I understand. It's all in the past now." "No, it hasn't passed." She shook her head. Her gaze became serious. "I have to compensate you, and not just with money but with something more." I didn't understand what she meant until we returned to Atlanta, and she took me to a luxurious office building on Peachtree Street. She led me to the top floor and opened the door to an office with a brass plaque that said, "Chair of the Board, Vega Real Estate Group." I froze. The Vega Group was one of the largest real estate conglomerates in the Southeast, a formidable competitor to Julian's old company. This is your company?" I stammered. "More exactly, it's the company your grandfather left to you, which I have been managing in the shadows for all these years without anyone knowing," said Mrs. Beatrice with a calm voice but full of pride. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother-in-law, the woman I thought was a simple housewife, was the president of a great empire. Why did you hide it? Because I wanted to put people to the test, daughter, she said, her gaze lost in the distance. I wanted to see how my own children would treat me if I had nothing, and I got my answer. They only cared about my money, my properties. Only you, Maya. Only you treated me with a sincere heart, even when you thought I was just a cranky old lady with nothing to offer. She turned to me, her gaze full of trust. Maya, I'm old now. I don't have the strength to continue with this. I want you to take my place. You have the talent, the courage, and most importantly, a noble heart. You will do better than me. Her proposal was like thunder. Me, president of the Vega Group? It was unimaginable. But I don't have experience in the real estate sector, I stammered. Business is business. It doesn't matter the sector, daughter, she smiled tenderly. If you could build a chain of shops from scratch, there is no reason why you can't lead this group. Besides, you won't be alone. You'll have me and a team of the most loyal people by your side. I looked at my mother-in-law, into her firm eyes. I knew it wasn't just an offer. It was a delivery of absolute trust. I was no longer an abandoned wife, a victim worthy of pity. I had the opportunity to start over, to build a career even more brilliant than before. I took a deep breath. Yes, I won't let you down, I said with a determined voice. That day, leaving the Vega Group building, I knew that my life had moved to a completely new page, full of challenges but also promises. I wouldn't just live for myself, but to live up to my mother-in-law's trust, to build a better future. And I knew that somewhere, Julian and Sienna, upon hearing this news, would regret it to the depths of their souls. But it was already too late. They themselves had destroyed everything they had. The news that Maya von Lockwood, the wife abandoned in Julian's scandal, was becoming the new president of the Vega Group overnight caused an even greater shock than the scandal at the hotel. The business world of Atlanta was on edge. No one could believe that the woman they considered a useless parasite had such an impressive background. The newspapers and news portals once again dedicated rivers of ink to me, but this time it wasn't criticism or compassion but admiration and wonder. They called me the mysterious businesswoman, the phoenix reborn from the ashes. My face appeared on the covers of prestigious business magazines. My story became a source of inspiration for millions of women. I didn't pay attention to the flattery. I knew the road ahead was full of thorns. Taking charge of a group like Vega was no easy task. I had to learn, push myself 100, 1,000 times more. I immersed myself in work like a moth to the light. By day meetings, project reviews, problem solving. By night I studied financial reports, real estate market documents. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, became my best advisor. She didn't intervene directly in management, but her advice and her valuable experience helped me enormously. She taught me to read people, to negotiate, to make bold but not reckless decisions. Little by little, I proved my worth. Under my leadership, the Vega Group was not only unaffected by the change in management but experienced spectacular growth. I implemented new business strategies, bold and effective. New projects were launched successfully, generating enormous profits. The shareholders, initially skeptical, now trusted me fully and supported me. Meanwhile, the trial against Julian and his accomplices came to an end. With irrefutable evidence and public indignation, the court handed down a very severe sentence. Julian Lockwood was sentenced to 15 years in prison for fraud and embezzlement. Danielle, the chief accountant, received 7 years for complicity. Sienna, although she didn't directly participate in the embezzlement, was sentenced to 3 years of probation for her role as instigator and beneficiary, and she had to return all the money she had spent. I didn't attend the trial. I didn't want to see their defeated faces again. For me, all accounts were settled that night at the hotel. I was told that upon hearing the sentence, Julian shouted and cursed, blaming me and my mother-in-law for everything. Sienna fainted in the room. Their family was completely destroyed. Their parents, seeing their 2 children involved in legal problems, collapsed. They had to sell the house in the country to try to pay for lawyers, but it was in vain. They paid a very high price for their greed and malice. One afternoon, about to leave the office, I received a call from an unknown number. It was my mother. Her voice sounded hesitant. Maya, Julian's parents. They've come to the house. I froze. What have they come for? They've come to ask for your forgiveness, said my mother. They're kneeling at the door, crying, saying they were wrong, asking you to forgive them and save Julian. The neighbors have gathered to watch. What do we do? I kept silent for a moment. A mix of emotions washed over me. Forgive after all they had done to me? Mama, I said with a calm voice, please tell them that I don't decide Julian's fate. The law decides it, and that I don't have the power to forgive his mistakes. The only person they should ask for forgiveness is their own conscience. Tell them to leave, please. I don't want to see them. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. I am not a saint. I couldn't easily forgive those who had trampled on my life without mercy, but I no longer hated them. They had paid their price. That was enough. Their lives from now on had nothing to do with mine. I looked out the window. The sunset was falling over the city. Another day was about to end. I smiled. My life was now truly beginning. A life without deception, without hate, only with work, with my mother-in-law, and a promising future ahead. Life after the trial passed with a lot of work, but in peace. I dedicated all my energy to leading the Vega Group. Under my leadership and with the advice of my mother-in-law, the company consolidated itself as one of the pillars of the real estate sector. I also didn't forget my chain of fashion boutiques. I restructured it, opened more branches, and turned my brand into a beloved name among young people. I was no longer a woman living in her husband's shadow. I had become an independent, autonomous, and successful businesswoman. I also dedicated more time to myself and to my mother-in-law. We traveled together, went to spas, enjoyed good meals. I realized that happiness is sometimes as simple as being with the people you love, doing the things you like. My relationship with Mrs. Beatrice became increasingly close. We were no longer mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but truly mother and daughter. She was not only my mentor at work, but my confidant, with whom I shared all my joys and sorrows. Sometimes she still mentioned Julian and Sienna with a sigh. I knew that in her heart she still felt the pain of a mother, but she never asked me to forgive or help them. She respected my decisions. One morning, while reviewing reports in my office, my secretary entered somewhat hesitantly. President, a person named Sienna Lockwood is asking to see you. It had been a long time since I had heard that name. Since the scandal, Sienna had disappeared without a trace. She left her job and cut all contact. Why was she looking for me now? Let her in, I said calmly. I wanted to see what else she could want from me. Sienna entered. She looked completely different. She was no longer the sophisticated and confident executive. She was much thinner, her face haggard, her eyes sunken, and with an expression of fatigue and fear. She was wearing an old office suit that had lost its elegance. Seeing me, she lowered her head, not daring to look at me. Maya, she murmured. Sit down, I pointed to a chair. What do you want? Sienna hesitated a moment and suddenly knelt before me, breaking into tears. Maya, I'm sorry. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I am so sorry. I beg you. Please save me. I was stunned by her action. Stand up. If you have something to say it calmly. I didn't want to seem magnanimous, but I also didn't want to witness that humiliating scene. After a while, Sienna calmed down and told me her story. It turned out that after Julian's scandal, his mistress, the model, had quickly fled with a large sum of money that Julian had embezzled, fleeing abroad and leaving Sienna alone to face the consequences. Sienna, as a friend and accomplice, was implicated. Although she wasn't criminally prosecuted like Julian and Danielle, her reputation in the financial world was ruined. No company wanted to hire her. She lived marginalized and despised by everyone. I've lost everything, Maya, she said through sobs. Career, friends, honor. I have nothing left. I've been doing manual labor for months to survive. I can't take it anymore. She looked at me, her eyes full of pleading. I know I don't deserve it, but I beg you. Give me an opportunity to rebuild my life. I promise to do whatever it takes to amend my error. I looked at her in silence. An indescribable sensation washed over me. Should I forgive her, the woman who, along with others, had stabbed me in the back? But then I saw a reflection of myself in her, the image of a woman who had also lost everything, who had been at the bottom of despair. If it hadn't been for my mother-in-law, perhaps I wouldn't have been able to get up either. Stand up, I said. My voice softened. I don't want to remember the past. We all make mistakes. The important thing is to know how to repent. Sienna looked up, her eyes opened with hope. So that means you. I haven't said I forgive you, I interrupted her. Betrayal isn't easily erased. But I can give you an opportunity. I took out a business card and wrote an address. This is the address of a social assistance center that the Vega Group sponsors. They need an accountant. It's not a glamorous job, and the salary isn't high, but it's enough for you to start over. Go there and use your talent to help people in need. Consider it a way to amend your mistakes. Sienna took the card, her hands trembling. She couldn't say anything. She just bowed her head, tears of repentance running down her cheeks. When she left, I followed her stooped figure with my gaze and felt a sensation of lightness. I realized that the sweetest revenge is not making your enemies suffer, but having the generosity to give them a way out, to let them face their own conscience, and more importantly, being able to transform the pain of the past into something meaningful to help others. That day I learned a true lesson about forgiveness. Life after forgiving Sienna seemed to enter a new chapter, lighter and more serene. The burden of the past had completely dissipated. I concentrated on my work and on caring for my mother-in-law. Under my leadership, the Vega Group consolidated its position in the market. We not only built luxury real estate projects, but also led social initiatives. The Magnolia Foundation, which I founded myself, helped hundreds of women entrepreneurs, creating a strong wave of female empowerment and independence. I became a role model, an inspiration for many. But in the depths of my heart, I felt something was missing. I had a career, money, fame, but not a true home. The huge estate, despite having my mother-in-law with me, sometimes felt empty. I longed to have a child, a little being to love and care for so that my life would be complete. But after everything that happened, I no longer believed in love. I didn't want to put my life in a man's hands again. I thought about adopting, but my mother-in-law had another idea. One night, while watching a romantic movie, she suddenly asked me, "Maya, have you thought about getting married again?" I was surprised by her question. "Mom, what are you saying?" "No, I haven't thought about that." "Why not?" She looked at me with tenderness. "You're young, beautiful, smart. You deserve to be happy, to have a man by your side who loves and protects you. Not all men are like Julian. But I'm afraid, Mom," I confessed. "Afraid that they will deceive me again, that they will hurt me." She took my hand. "I understand, but you can't close your heart forever over a stumble. Give yourself an opportunity, and give it to someone else. There is someone I want to introduce to you. He is a very good man." I never imagined that my mother-in-law would become my matchmaker. The man she introduced to me was Adrian, the son of one of her best friends who had passed away. He was a pediatrician, 5 years older than me, divorced, and raising his little daughter alone. I had seen him a couple of times at family gatherings. My impression was that of a quiet man of few words, with a kind smile and a very warm gaze. With my mother-in-law's push, Adrian and I started dating. At first it was just coffees and trivial conversations, but little by little I felt attracted by his sincerity, his understanding, and his good heart. He didn't use pretty words or give me expensive gifts. He was simply by my side in silence, listening to me, comforting me when I was tired. He also told me about his past marriage, about the pain and difficulties of raising a daughter alone. By his side, I felt at peace and could be myself. I didn't need to pretend to be strong or hide my wounds. He loved the real Maya, with my virtues and my weaknesses. Imani, his daughter, was an adorable and affectionate girl. She quickly became attached to me. Every weekend the three of us went to the park, to the movies, for ice cream together. Seeing the girl's innocent smile filled my heart with a warmth I longed for, the desire to be a mother. One afternoon while we were in the park, Imani ran toward me, hugged me, and said, "Auntie Maya, can I call you Mommy?" Her words took my breath away. Tears came to my eyes. I hugged her tight, nodding happily. Of course you can, my sweet girl. Adrian, who was beside us, looked at us with eyes bright with emotion. He approached, knelt, and took out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple but exquisite diamond ring. Maya, do you want to marry me? He said with a sincere and warm voice. I don't promise you the material wealth you already have, but I promise you something you have always looked for. A family, a true home, a place where there will be me, Imani, and unconditional love. I didn't hesitate any longer. I nodded and held out my hand for him to put the ring on. A tear of happiness rolled down my cheek. After so many storms, I had finally found my safe harbor. Our wedding was simple but cozy, on a beach in Savannah, only with family and closest friends. My mother and Adrian's mother, the two grandmothers, held hands, smiling radiantly. Imani, in a beautiful princess dress, was the maid of honor for her own parents. At the moment of exchanging rings under the spectacular sunset, I knew I had found true happiness, a happiness that didn't come from money or fame but from sincerity, understanding, and true love. Life after the wedding with Adrian was a sweet and quiet dream. We moved to the estate in Buckhead. The house, once cold, now overflowed with Imani's laughter and the warmth of a true family. Adrian was a wonderful husband and father. He loved me deeply and cared for Imani with dedication. He helped her with homework, played with her, told her stories before bedtime. His love slowly healed the girl's wounds, helping her to be more cheerful and secure. I also found happiness in my role as a mother. I learned to cook Imani's favorite dishes. I decorated her room like a princess castle. I spent time talking and sharing confidences with her. The unconditional love I gave her was also the medicine for my own scars. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, was delighted with my new family. She treated Adrian like a son and Imani like her granddaughter. Every weekend we all got together, cooked together, watched movies. That warm and happy environment was what I had longed for so long. My work in the Vega Group was still demanding, but I learned to balance my professional and family life. I was no longer obsessed with work. I knew that the greatest success for a woman is not how much money she earns, but building a happy family. One afternoon in the office, I received a call from the prison. It was Julian. I hadn't heard from him in a long time. I hesitated but finally answered. Maya, it's me. His voice sounded hoarse and tired. Julian, I replied calmly. Are you calling me for something? No, nothing in particular. I just wanted to ask for your forgiveness again. I know it's too late, but I truly repent. In here I've had a lot of time to think. I was wrong in an unforgivable way. I destroyed my own happiness. I lost the best woman in the world. I listened in silence. My heart was at peace. I'm also ashamed before my mother, he continued with a breaking voice. I'm a bad son. I wasn't by her side when she needed me most. If you can, please take care of her for me. And of my parents, too. They're old now and have suffered a lot. I know I have no right to ask you this, but you don't need to say more, I interrupted him. I will take care of your parents. You concentrate on reforming yourself. It's the best way to amend your mistakes. I hung up. I no longer felt rage, only pity. He had paid a very high price for his mistakes. A few days later, I visited the old and humble neighborhood where his parents lived. After the scandal, they had to sell everything and return to their old apartment. I stood in front of the peeling wooden door with a strange sensation. I knocked. Julian's mother opened. Seeing me, she was paralyzed, eyes full of surprise and shame. She had aged a lot. She no longer had that haughty and acidic air. Maya, what are you doing here? She stammered. I've come to visit you. I smiled a smile without resentment. I entered the small apartment, messy and smelling of dampness. His father was bedridden on a folding bed. After a stroke, he had been paralyzed on one side. Seeing me, he tried to sit up with tearful eyes. I left a basket of fruit and an envelope on the table. I brought you a little something. There is some money here for you to get by. I've also contacted a good rehabilitation center. They will come to the house to help the gentleman with his exercises. Julian's mother broke into tears of late repentance. Maya, we've done so much damage to you. We don't deserve this. The past is in the past, I said sincerely. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Julian. After all, he was my husband, and I'm also doing it for myself. I don't want to live with hate. I left there with a light heart. I realized that forgiving not only frees the other, but frees yourself. Only when you let go of the past can you find peace and happiness. A year after our wedding, our small family welcomed a new member, a precious boy identical to Adrian. The arrival of little Malachi brought us complete happiness. The estate was always full of the laughter of the two children. Imani became a wonderful older sister who adored and pampered her brother. Seeing them play together filled my heart with warmth and gratitude. I thanked life for the opportunity to be a mother, to experience that sacred and unconditional love. I continued my work in the Vega group, but I learned to organize my time more efficiently. I delegated more to my collaborators. I wanted to spend more time with my family, with Adrian and the children, because I understood that no career can replace the happiness of home. Adrian remained an exemplary husband and father, my rock at work and in life. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, retired completely and dedicated her time to caring for her two grandchildren. Her joy was seeing them grow healthy and happy. The Magnolia Foundation grew into a very influential organization, a home for thousands of women entrepreneurs across the country. I no longer directed it directly but had passed the torch to the new generation, acting only as a mentor and source of inspiration. Sometimes I received news of Julian's family. His parents lived a modest and quiet life in their small town. Julian, after a few years of good behavior, was released from prison on parole. He became a quiet and reserved man. He stayed in the town, found a normal job, and started over. He never contacted me again. Sienna, for her part, also changed. She led a discreet life and, as I learned, had married and started a family. Perhaps after all, she also found her way. One weekend afternoon, the whole family was in the garden. Adrian and Imani were playing on the lawn. My mother-in-law and I were rocking on the swing with little Malachi in our arms, watching the sunset. "Are you happy, Maya?" my mother-in-law suddenly asked me. I smiled and rested my head on her shoulder. "I am very happy, Mom. I have never felt so happy and at peace." "Me too," she said with her gaze lost on the horizon. "My life has had many storms. I thought I would never find happiness, but then you arrived, bringing light and hope. Thank you, my daughter." I hugged her, overwhelmed by emotion. My journey hadn't been easy. I had fallen, suffered, despaired, but I didn't give up. I got up stronger, more resilient, and finally found happiness, a real happiness. I looked at Adrian and the children laughing, at my mother-in-law smiling beside me, and I realized that life is like a painting with its lights and shadows. The important thing is to know how to go through the darkness to find and paint our own bright colors. And I had found the color palette of my life. Years later, when I was the age my mother-in-law was then and my hair was tinged with silver, I often sat on the porch to tell my grandchildren the story of my life, the story of a woman who went from the abyss of despair to the peak of happiness. The children listened to me with wide eyes. They didn't understand all the pain and intrigue. They only knew that their grandmother was a very strong woman. "Grandma, when I grow up I want to be like you," said my eldest granddaughter. I smiled and stroked her head. "You don't need to be like Grandma. Just be yourself. Live an honest and kind life, and never allow anyone to trample on your dignity. That is enough." I received an anonymous letter. Inside, a handwritten note in trembling handwriting. "Mrs. Maya, I am Julian's father. I know I have no right to write to you, but before closing my eyes I want to ask for your forgiveness. Forgiveness for everything. We were blind with greed. The price we paid was very high but fair. I only hope that wherever you are very happy. You deserve it." I folded the letter at peace. All resentment had vanished with time. My life was now a succession of quiet days with my family. Adrian and I, our children now adults and successful, Imani a brilliant architect, Malachi a talented entrepreneur following in my footsteps, and the grandchildren who filled our house with joy. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Beatrice, left us a few years ago in peace and surrounded by love. Before leaving, she took my hand and said, "Maya, I don't regret having chosen you. You did better than I ever dreamed. The Magnolia Foundation was now a global impact organization. I was only an advisor, a mentor for the new generations. Sometimes I looked back to that rainy afternoon, to the woman kicked out with a torn bag. It was no longer a painful memory, but a reminder of the value of strength, love, and forgiveness. From the balcony, I looked at the flowering garden. The wind brought a sweet scent. My life had been a long journey with ups and downs, laughter and tears, but I didn't regret anything. Everything that had passed had made me who I am today, Maya, who found happiness not on the outside but in the peace of her own soul. And I knew that my story didn't end here. It would continue through my children, my grandchildren, and all the women of the Magnolia Foundation. It would become an eternal song about resilience, faith, and the beauty of life, a song called The Phoenix Rises.